It's recording me for some reason, still semi-following around.
His son's 6th birthday.
What's up, guys? Nuance Bro checking in. We're here in San Francisco, California at the gun control rally. Let's go talk to people, see what's going on. So why are we out here today?
We're out here to put pressure on our senators so that they will pass comprehensive background checks and red flag laws.
Sure. And why do you think that's something that's important to do in this country?
I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, why do you think that's something that's important to do in this country?
Well, over 80% of Americans, regardless of party, want comprehensive background checks passed. So it's mind-boggling that one man, meaning Mitch McConnell, who's the head of the Senate, hasn't brought this up for a vote. So the bills are there sitting on his desk collecting dust. So we're just putting pressure on him as well as other Republican senators that need to get with the program.
Sure. Do you think just because a majority necessarily supports a certain policy or proposal that necessarily makes it a good policy?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that we live in democracy where it's one person, one vote, and majority rules. And again, when you have 80% of Americans that want some legislation passed, then it's the will of the people. I mean, this is the only way that change comes about, is when people gather collectively and petition their government for redress and to pass legislation.
Sure, but I mean, historically, for example, we had Prop 8, for example, in California, where a majority voted to ban gay marriage, but that was overturned by the courts. Do you think that was the will of the people in that case, but that was overturned? So historically, civil rights, you know, the majority of the country was actually against civil rights, emancipation for slavery, and things like that. So, I mean, does a majority support necessarily mean it's a good policy?
Well, when you put it in that frame of reference, yes, sometimes the courts get it wrong. And then you have to correct that action that they did. So
not the courts, I'm saying the people actually in that case.
Well, again, it's to raise the consciousness of people. They need to evolve. You need to share your stories so that they understand that how it affects their fellow neighbor. And once you do that, then you kind of break down the fear and the misconceptions, and you know what's needed is education. So
education, people might be misinformed about the issue. For example, we're here in San Francisco, one of the strictest gun control places in the world. How do you feel like that's affecting the crime rates here in San Francisco versus other parts of the country, like states like Vermont and New Hampshire or Maine, where they have like virtually no gun control laws, but they have much lower levels of homicide and crime?
Well, I think it's an all-encompassing approach. I mean, it is, here in California, what I believe is to export our values to the rest of the country. There are many, because we have a Democratic majority legislation here in our state, we have passed many gun reform laws. And so if it can just prevent one gun violence, tragedy from happening, then I'm all for it.
Sure. So anything that you feel like would reduce necessarily, like even by one death, you think it is something that we should support, even if it comes at the expense of maybe people's rights or sovereignty?
I believe so, and I think that we can strike a balance. I mean, we're not going to infringe on someone else's rights, but for me personally, I was always for someone can have their pistol, someone can have their rifle to go hunt. I'm not advocating hunting, I'm a vegetarian, sure. But the point, because of these last two mass shootings, I believe it's a tipping point here in our country, and bottom line, we don't need assault rifles on the streets of America. That's what everybody says, they belong on the battlefield. So
well, I mean, these aren't the ones that were used in these tragedies weren't assault rifles. I mean, some people classify them as assault weapons, so semi-automatic variants of assault rifles, so it's a bit of a distinction. But you said if something reduces homicide, I guess, even by one death, that's something that's worthy of approaching, and you don't think we should take any other things into account there? For example, what people would say is, blacks in this country are responsible for over 50% of homicides. They would say, well, if you just ban those people, then you would get rid of half the murders in this country. Of course, that's something that where we draw a line and say, of course not, that's horrible. You have to take, I mean, rights and principles, people's rights should come into account, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a pretty radical idea.
So you don't support that, right? I mean, it would eliminate half of the murders statistically,
No,
right?
but I mean, then we stumble into other issues about discrimination and hardship for people of color in our country. So it just keeps touching many, many different issues. So
Anything else you'd like to say?
I just think that we as Americans can do what other countries around the world have done, and that is to eliminate guns. Guns are the reason why there's so much violence on our streets. So I advocate for it all the time.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So why are we out here today?
Just because gun violence is senseless, and there's so much that we can do that makes sense, that we need to stop and make those changes that are necessary.
And what can we do to stop that?
Well, I think the background checks are an important part. I think we really have to stop having guns of like the AK-47s available. I think we need to have those things changed as a start.
So something like an AK-47, AR-15, why do you feel like those should be banned?
Well, there's no need for, someone who uses guns for the reasons that they're available, like for sport. That makes sense to have guns available, but there's no sense to have those guns available to the average, person who's just using them for sport. Yeah.
What's like the differentiating factor in those guns that you feel like makes them more dangerous than, say, handguns, for example?
Well, handguns I think are dangerous as well. I mean, there's a lot of violence that comes from them as well. But I think that those machines that can quickly fire off so many rounds,
like machine guns, you're talking.
Exactly.
But none of those have been used in the mass shootings. Machine guns, they've been effectively sort of regulated out of existence since 1934. We're talking about semi-automatic, what they call assault weapons,
Correct.
not assault rifles.
Correct.
But
correct.
Why do you feel like those ones that they're trying to ban are more dangerous?
They can fire off so many rounds so quickly, right? There's no need to have those around.
But I mean, like, what's the difference in the rate of fire versus like a handgun, for example? Because they're both semi-automatic technology. One pull the trigger, one round, right? So I mean, it's as fast as you can pull the trigger, basically.
Yeah, I think it's just the mass amount of people that you can murder so quickly. That's the difference there. Yeah.
And so what type of legislation specifically do you support that we feel like we should pass in this country? Because right now we're in San Francisco. In California, we have the strictest gun laws effectively in the nation.
Yeah.
I mean, we still have higher rates of murder than many other states that have almost no gun laws. Where do you think the balance should be struck?
I think background checks make a difference. But I think a lot of people aren't going to have those things that tip off the background checks. So I think that's why limiting the amount of guns that are available, any kind of guns, especially again the ones that can rapidly fire, I think that's going to be critical here. And I think that's a big difference that a lot of people aren't willing to go towards, but I think we need to go in that direction.
But I'm still trying to understand, because a handgun, semi-automatic, one pull the trigger, one round, same as these rifles that you're talking about, one pull the trigger, one round. It seems like the rate of fire is the same. So why are we focusing on the rifles, which statistically might be 2% of all? I mean, just all rifles, not even just semi-automatic. All rifles are responsible for about 2% of homicides in the country, whereas handguns are almost like 80% or plus of the homicides.
Yeah, we can focus on all kinds of weapons. I mean, honestly, we can.
Do you support a handgun ban?
I support more conversation than we're currently having about bans, about the guns that are available. Yeah.
Sure, but don't we need to have more than conversation if we want to solve the problem? Is there any specific policy proposals around handguns that you support?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can start with conversations. Okay. Yeah, I think we can start with conversations, which we're not having nowadays.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. Are we good to go? All right. So why are we out here today?
We are here with Moms Demand Action to demand that the Senate do something to end gun violence.
Sure. And what's that something?
Well, there's a lot of things I could list. I would love to see a ban of semi-automatic weapons and the ammunition that goes with them, but right now we're working on background checks.
Sure. And when it comes to semi-automatic weapons, you mean all of them, or just the rifles, or what are you talking about here? So even like handguns, for example?
Well, anything that can be used, just like I would like to mirror California state laws.
Sure.
Yeah.
California allows semi-automatic handguns, for example, though.
Well, we've banned the bump stocks, so I don't know how you would.
That's like rifles. I mean, that's federally actually, the bump
well, and you
stocks,
can't get the semi-automatic ammunition here in California. So.
What's semi-automatic ammunition?
The large magazines.
Oh, the magazines, not the ammunition.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the magazines.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
You can't get the high capacity stuff. You could, I guess, illegally ship
Somebody's
them.
here to chat with you. What's
sure.
Up?
Yes. Hello.
Oh, I wasn't. I'm just.
Oh, okay.
He looked like he had a question for you.
Okay. So you're talking high-capacity magazine bans, for example, on a federal level.
I'd like to see our children, our communities safer, and that's what we're here to demand today. But I think there's a moment of silence.
That's right. Where'd she go?
Thank you so much.
She disappeared?
When a person is shot, it's like throwing a stone into still water. The impact
All right.
goes throughout the community.
Let's keep going, I guess.
To demand action in the U.S.
I think she disappeared during that moment of silence.
We must also come together to heal. It is a great honor to introduce a woman who was a key part of putting together today's event. Who currently serves
Would you like to do anything?
No,
I'm good, thanks.
Chapter of the Brady campaign, and who has been a tireless voice in the fight against.
I think this guy's
crime for
following
more than 2
us.
decades, and is certainly one of the most amazing women I have ever met.
Is there a reason you're following us,
Please
sir?
help me welcome the amazing Maddie Scott.
So this guy's kind of following us.
You don't want to be on camera.
Whoa, buddy, don't come up near that. What are you
I don't
doing?
want to be on your camera.
But you're in public and you're following me, so why are you doing that? What the hell? The dude in the green vest is also following a little bit, but this is a theme that you see sometimes, you know? Hi there. Is there a reason you're recording me? Sure, you want to get that on there? He's recording me for some reason, still semi-following around.
His son's 6th birthday.
And now he's filming my camera woman. Oh, watch out, watch out. All right, so not sure why we're doing this. Is there a specific problem you have with me, sir? All right, this is kind of creepy, but alrighty. By the way, guys, if you want to support the channel, I just opened up a new website. Go to nuancebro.com/join if you want to support this channel. As you can see, when we come out here, it gets kind of hard. People follow us, they stalk us, they try to make it so we can't do what we do. And also you have YouTube demonetizing the channel. So if you want to support the channel, nuancebro.com/join. Thank you. And now he's showing up behind here again. Why are you following me, man?
Listen to what you have to say.
Do you want to talk to me, or?
I want to hear what you're saying.
I was just talking to the camera. I mean, but like, do you have a certain perception of me that you think like I'm
I
a?
don't.
But then why are you being so hostile?
I'm not being hostile at all.
It's,
I want to hear what you have to say.
dude, come on, you're being disingenuous. Come on.
No, I'm not.
You're being a little bit creepy.
All right, we're about to leave anyway, but you're making this woman feel pretty uncomfortable. Do you feel good about that?
No, I'm not.
Is he making you feel uncomfortable?
Oh, yeah, it's making me very uncomfortable.
She just said you're making her feel uncomfortable.
Good for you, then go away.
Oh, so it's our responsibility to go away when you're fucking following us, dude. So why are we out here today?
I'm a school teacher from the state of Oregon. I'm visiting my mother-in-law, Nancy. I have 4 children of my own. I'm hoping that my children become political activists in life. They have in the last 2 years, especially with the Trump administration. I feel like this is a very personal issue. I'm a teacher who has to conduct drills in my classroom. We went through a lockdown situation at school last year. I find myself sick to my stomach and disgusted every time I have to run the drills, let alone be in an actual situation. I worry for my children, I worry for my neighbors, I worry for my country. I feel it's very important to get out here and make some noise and make sure that common sense legislation happens in our country.
And how do you feel like we can solve this issue?
I think more people need to show up on the streets, pressuring their Congress people. We're lucky in the state of Oregon. We have very responsive legislators at the national level. But, for example, my daughter's attending college in Nevada this fall. She's starting as a freshman, and she will register to vote in the state of Nevada as a student to help turn that purple state more in favor of the Democrats. I think voting is key. Getting young people to vote is key. I'm doing my best as a teacher to remain neutral in my classroom on most issues, but I am really encouraging students to become civic activists and make sure that they're taking action and voting especially.
But is there any specific policy proposals that you feel like we should enact? Or
If I had my way, I would abolish the Second Amendment, but knowing that that is not really an easy fight. We do need to pass background checks on everyone who gets their hands on a gun. I know that's difficult to do when guns are procured illicitly, but if people are purchasing guns legally, there should absolutely be no choice on the table to get high-capacity weapons that are meant to kill people on the battlefield. It's unbelievable to me, the tragedies that happen daily, weekly in our country, and so many of those are because of these very violent weapons.
Gun violence restraining orders.
Sure. So you're talking about like assault weapons, things are semi-automatic rifles, for example.
No place in civilian hands.
Sure. Do you know about like what percentage of gun deaths or gun homicides in this country are committed by these types of weapons, for example?
I don't know that statistic.
It's like less than 2%. I believe the vast majority is handguns, for example.
Yes.
So what do you believe we should do about handguns? Because that's the majority of gun violence is committed by handguns.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, in a perfect world, as a mother, as a teacher, I believe no one should have guns except the military and the police. That's my absolute fundamental belief about that. Realistically, as a pragmatist, with legislation as it goes in our country, the things that are causing these massive casualties in one fell swoop within a few minutes, they need to go. They need to be gone. That's a first step. After that, we need to deal with handguns as well. I realize. So, yeah.
So I mean, historically, we actually used to see people like Martin Luther King, who was an advocate for gun rights, for example. You had people like Malcolm X, who was very pro Second Amendment as well, and these people historically were oppressed by sometimes even the police in their community. They couldn't rely on those people, so they had to take self-defense in their own hands. But would you take their rights away to protect themselves via guns and things like that?
Just like Mayor Breed said.
We have a lot of issues to deal with police brutality as well.
So we should let them keep all the guns? Is that?
Well, no. I'm saying I understand that concern. I fully do appreciate that. I guess I'm saying in a perfect world, I would not have citizens walking around with guns, but I would also have a police force in place that is responsive to the needs of people, all people in their community.
Sure, in a perfect world.
Yeah,
but in a perfect world, but we have to obviously deal with the reality we live in today. So, realistically speaking, like, what should we do?
Well, I guess realistically, where I'm placing my energies right now are on these. I guess maybe the statistically not as prevalent weapons, but the ones that are really causing these large numbers of casualties in recent years in the news. And so I feel like it's really important to we'll deal with those ones first, and I will say. Most of these assault weapons, violent acts have been perpetrated by white men, and there's a very specific...
Statistically, that's actually not true.
Oh, is that right?
No, well, I mean, obviously most of them have been carried by white men, but proportionally, because obviously most of the country is white people, but proportionally based on like what percentage of the population a specific ethnicity or race is, other groups have committed higher rates than their percentage of the population.
With assault weapons,
About assault weapons specifically, I'm not sure. I think so, but just when we're talking about mass killings, like mass shootings in general, it's actually they actually commit less than their portion of the population.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting to hear. I do think along that line, I guess I am a public school teacher, and for a long time I felt that we also need to put in place much more easy access for students for mental health counseling. I feel like over the years I have encountered kids that I've had some serious concerns about in terms of being potentially violent with a partner, with a friend, with the school, and we lack the resources often to deal with those. So I guess there's a multi-pronged
we know the names of the hotel. We know the names of
tactic that has to happen, and some of that, in my mind, involves banning assault weapons, banning high-caliber weapons that are used in these multiple bullets. I'm not a gun person.
Sure,
so, okay. But also, we need to have a mental health piece in place as well, and then the background checks I think are essential. So that we get guns out of the hands, and whether that's handguns or these high-capacity weapons, out of the hands of potential abusers, people with a history of violence, and that includes people with a history of police being called because they're abusing their children or their wives or their husbands.
And just like one sort of last question around this. So obviously we're in California, San Francisco in particular, some of the strictest gun laws in the entire country. We have what's technically considered an assault weapons ban ban, full background checks and everything on private sales, store sales, everything. Yet we still have higher rates of homicide than many of these states that have almost no gun laws, like Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Idaho, all these different states. So what do you think is like the main factor when it comes to these higher rates of murder, homicide, and things like that?
I'm honored to be a member.
I don't know that I have an answer for that that is succinct, but it's interesting to me coming this morning out of the BART tunnel, for example. I'm from the state of Oregon. I'm from a small town, from a college town in Oregon. It's interesting to come out of the tube and see these beautiful buildings and then walk through just what looks like very destitute poverty all around me.
So homeless people, drugs.
Yeah, just a lot of social issues that are maybe being addressed, but not comprehensively enough to care for all of the people. It is always surprising to me how the density of population in California seems to make people crabby, and everybody's trying to do the same thing at the same time. I don't know if that's the difference. It's urban living in San Francisco. You do have San Francisco does have it sounds like tight gun restrictions and gun laws, and yet they're dealing with this kind of violence. I don't know if that has something to do with sort of that urban mentality of like not caring for the neighbors and people getting irritated.
Low social trust, low social capital.
I think there's something to that. I say that naively. I say that coming from a state that's a little bit friendlier and a little
saying hi to your neighbors. And
absolutely, a little bit maybe kinder, gentler society or culture in our town, and we have some serious social issues to deal with there as well. It's not discounting. We have homeless population that's not adequately cared for, but I feel like there is more of a maybe a neighbors helping neighbors or neighbors watching out for neighbors feeling where I'm from. So,
all right, thank you so much. By the way, guys, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell for future videos. So why are we out here today?
So I am a teacher. I work in public school, and I also have 2 daughters, both of whom are in schools where they regularly have to practice lockdown drills. And I just think that it is the responsibility of Congress to pass common sense gun legislation, and I think enough is enough.
Sure. And what kind of common sense gun legislation specifically are you looking for?
I mean, I think the bill that's sitting on Mr. McConnell's desk that is going to help it's going to address background checks is the first step, and it's been sitting, the House passed it, it's been sitting on his desk, and he's done nothing about it. So specifically, I would like to see that, and red flag laws.
Red flag laws?
Red flag laws, sorry, yeah.
It's a bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah.
Is there anything beyond that you support as well, or?
I think that we need to address the fact that no one really needs an assault rifle. No one needs to have a gun that has such destructive capacity.
Sure, like can you define an assault rifle for the viewers?
Sure. So assault rifles that have, where you can fire a multitude of bullets, and it has such devastating impacts on people's. Automatic weapons. Yeah.
So you know that automatic weapons weren't used in any of these tragedies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They weren't used.
Yeah, but I still think that I just don't think that anyone should have assault-style military weapons in their hands.
Sure, but I mean, like those have already sort of been effectively outlawed since 1934. Like almost no. That's why they haven't been used in mass shootings. The ones that have been used are these semi-automatic variants, like the ones that can shoot about as fast as handguns. So what do you feel like really differentiates the difference between those types of rifles, semi-automatic rifles, versus semi-automatic handguns, for example?
I mean, I can't answer that. I don't know enough about that, but I just think that there are certain weapons. I don't necessarily think that the Second Amendment needs to be eradicated. I understand why some people feel the need to have a gun for self-protection. I just don't think that certain guns are necessary for that. So. And that's my answer, really.
So for handguns, for example, I mean, we're primarily focusing on assault-type weapons. We have an assault weapons ban here in California, for example, but it seems like the vast majority of gun homicides are with handguns. Like I think something like over 80%.
Right.
How come we're not focusing on that when things like all rifles are responsible for like 2%?
Well, I think we are focusing on that. And I think that that is what the background check is going to help address. Like in California, for instance, we have really strong laws, but in states like Nevada, they're not as strong. And so that just makes us as a state less safe. So I think that addressing background checks to make sure that people go through the proper vetting system, I guess, before they obtain a weapon, I think that that would help a lot.
So you mentioned California. We have strict background checks. We have it for, store sales. Of course, that's on a federal level. We have it for private sales. We have it for pretty much everything. If you want to get a gun, even if it's transferred, even from your parents, you have to notify the state, everything. But you have these other states, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, Idaho, various states, but they have none of those effectively. I mean, they have the store ones, but they don't have the same background checks laws as us, yet they have much lower homicide rates than California. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think like like Chicago, for instance, which has like a very high rate of, gun violence, a lot of those guns are coming in from Indiana, right? So I just think if we kind of federally have some restrictions put in place, I think that in general, studies show that that would make us more safe.
Sure, but for example, like the guns that are coming from Indiana, how come they're not like more violent in Indiana, but they get more violent when it goes into Chicago?
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah,
okay. Sure. And is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
The gun can be manipulated to hold a magazine that holds more bullets. There are guns out there that, and I believe
I think they manipulate
that's
the magazine. They don't manipulate the guns.
Okay, all I know is guns can be manipulated to hold more bullets that will kill more people within seconds. That has to be outlawed. Period.
So why are we out here today?
Well, I'm here with my dad and sister. We're just interested in getting involved in gun reform, kind of taking a stand in the ways we can. So.
Sure. And what are we trying to achieve, like policy-wise, maybe?
I think what the speaker said about it not being a bipartisan issue, but just kind of a group effort to just make sure guns aren't in the wrong hands, wrong people. I think it's about gun safety, and it shouldn't be easier to get a rental car. I mean, the hardest part about shooting up a garlic festival shouldn't be getting the rental car. It should be about getting a gun.
So the garlic festival you're talking about, Gilroy specifically.
Yeah.
So we're in California, some of the strictest. We're in California, some of the strictest gun laws in the entire country, and he did that shooting in California. What laws that we currently have what laws do you feel like aren't currently on the books that we need here in California, for example?
I think we need stricter background checks.
In California?
I think federal. I think California, we're starting to make changes, obviously, but just bordering states, like he drove to Nevada. The hardest part was getting a rental car, as I said. I think it needs to be kind of carried out on a federal level, and we need to all band together to kind of make it hard for the guns to fall in the wrong hands.
Sure. Didn't he buy the gun in California, though, the Gilroy shooter?
I thought he drove to Nevada, but I could be wrong, so I don't know about that.
I'm not sure exactly, but I mean, because I think he bought the gun in California, and then I think he might have modified it after the fact, but I mean, you said stronger background checks. Like, I don't understand. Like, we already have like the strongest background checks here in California, as far as private sales are regulated, sales at gun stores are regulated, even transfers from parents to children are regulated. So, like, what do you think additionally, as far as background checks here in California, is something that we should do?
I guess maybe I mean more on a federal level, kind of carried out federal rather than just state, local.
And what other type of like federal legislation do you think is something that would benefit and help curb gun violence in this country?
I guess the age restriction would kind of like limit gun purchasing, like over 21.
Sure. So for like rifles and shot, because it's already over 21 for handguns at stores.
I don't really think that anyone should be able to carry around an assault rifle, in my personal opinion. So I guess.
And what do you define as an assault rifle?
Just automatic and semi-automatic weapons.
Well, like automatic weapons weren't used in any of these shootings, for example. Like they're already effectively sort of banned.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, like, what do you mean by assault rifles exactly?
just, I don't know, assault rifles. I don't know.
But I mean, like, is it the way a gun looks or how it functions? Like, what?
How it functions.
Sure, but like, in what way does it function, for example, differently than like a semi-automatic pistol, for example?
I don't really know enough about handguns or semi-automatic pistols versus.
But you know, like, what semi-automatic means?
Yeah,
it means one round per pull of the trigger. Yes. So, I mean, what's the difference between like a handgun that fits that description versus a rifle?
I don't know.
Okay. But do you support banning the handguns as well, or no?
I think the first step is just kind of making it. I guess the first step is just kind of making it harder for anyone to. I don't know.
Sure. Because I mean, I know we're focusing on assault weapons here in this thing. I mean, we see it. It kind of creates a spectacle when we have these mass shootings. It's super tragic, kills lots of people. Yes. Especially like in the Las Vegas massacre, you saw all those deaths from some that were using semi-automatic rifles. But the vast majority of gun deaths in this country, as far as homicides are concerned, are committed by handguns. Mm-hmm. Why do you feel like the conversation isn't focused more on handguns?
I don't know. I guess the conversation should be kind of more. It should be more open to different kinds of guns. I think people have the perception of people carrying the big assault rifles and stuff.
So it looks scary.
Because it looks scary, exactly, the appearance. So I guess the conversation should be tailored to include handguns as well. Yeah.
And is there any legislation you think that we could use specifically towards handguns or anything like that?
I don't know, just still background checks, I guess, which I know there are some background checks in California and everything, but yeah, I don't really know. Sorry.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it. If you guys enjoyed the video, let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Social media links are in the description box below, as well as merch. And I'll see you next time, bro. Still recording.
It's a scream I don't want none of you to ever have to hear. It's a scream I don't want.
Alrighty.
No grandma.
I mean, I'm used to being on camera, so I mean, it's fine.